Okay, we're uncomfortably close. That means one of two things. We're either going to play good touch, bad touch, or, well, I got some smaller stuff for us to look at. How about that? Okay, one of the most misunderstood baits out there, and techniques, okay? Shaky heads. Okay? Let's get to the head itself. There are basically two types of heads. There's this type of head with the spring, and there's this type of head with the small keeper on it. Okay? Now, they're both good. Okay? One to me is better than the other, but one can be modified slightly to make it better than it already is. Okay? This is the shaky head that most of us started out with, the guy with the spring. Okay? The problem with the spring, if you look at it, from there to the hook gap is not a whole lot, okay? You'll hook a lot of fish on it, okay? You'll jump some off. Not a lot of them, some of them, okay? Enough of them that, well, if you're going to fish a tournament or you're trying to outfish your buddy standing next to you, it could make a difference, okay? So let's talk about two modifications you can do to this head to make it catch more fish. Number one, you can change the spring angle, okay? Usually the angle comes on the spring, kind of like that, okay, sticking up in the air. You can take and you can bend that spring down closer to the hook, okay? That gives you a little bit more bite. The other thing you can do is you can take half of that spring off with cutters. Again, it increases the bite on the hook, okay? You don't need to throw them away. There's a pretty good fix for them. It's still not as good as the other one, in my opinion. It might be in yours, but in my opinion, I prefer the one with the keeper on it. Okay? Now, the one with the keeper. Okay, this is a VMC. I honestly don't remember what this is. The two that I prefer, and I don't have the other one right now, is the Z-Man. It's the Brian Latimer Shaking My Head, or SMH, or whatever it's called head. It's a little more weedless for fishing in grass. And while we're at it, where am I going to fish this? Well, I'm generally going to fish it around some type of cover, whether it's a rocky bottom, a bank with a lay down, some type of object, okay? Now, that's most of the time. The other time, I may be fishing this on a ledge. Now, a lot of times there'll be a piece of brush on the ledge or whatever, but that's completely different than what I'm talking about, okay? For standard shaky head fishing. Now, this is because I'm in the Northeast United States for a lot of my fishing. If I were in Texas, if I were in Kentucky Lake, if I was somewhere around Gunnersville, I would probably be fishing a different size worm, okay? But I start out, my most popular worm, Zoom Finesse worm. I keep color simple. South African Special, which is basically a black. June bug, universally loved by bass everywhere. I like this guy, Green Pumpkin Blue Flash, okay? And if the water's really, really clear, I'll go to a watermelon with red flake. Great. If I want to upsize my bait a little bit, okay, still staying with a pretty short bait, but I'll go with the Zoom Magnum Finesse worm. Okay, this is in the Northeast United States. Like I said, we're just going to take it, going to put it in a tiny bit. Okay, we're going to do the whole Texas rig deal with it, where we're going to turn it, and this keeper hooks the worm pretty good. And I'm just going to push the worm through. Push the hook through all the way, and I'm going to back it up some. Okay, now some people like to hook it through the, the side of the skin and all. But that's your basic rig. I think I got it relatively straight. Okay. Now, let's talk about if you're down south somewhere, or somewhere with some bigger average fish. I'm going to upsize this worm. I'll switch from this to the trick worm or to the Magnum trick worm. If I'm going to fish out on a ledge, maybe instead of this 1/8 or 3/16 head, I'm going to switch to a 3/8 head on casting tackle, probably a 7-foot rod, 12 to 14 pound line, and with that Magnum version, okay, Magnum size hook and all that, that's probably more appropriate for your area. But up here, most of our fishing is spinning rod fishing with it. Probably 8-pound line would be the most common. If I'm fishing in a tidal place or a place with some dirty water where I want heavier line and a bait caster might not be appropriate, I'll take and I'll put some 15-pound braid and about a 6-foot leader of 10 or 12-pound line, and that's it. The other part of this is, how do you retrieve it? Let's talk about that some. Okay, I'm going to make a cast. Hits the water, let it fall on a slack line. Gets all the way down to the bottom. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're not going to shake it. Most of the time we're not shaking it. We're going to do a slow pull. Basically what a lot of people call counting the rocks. You want to maintain, you want to feel everything that this drags on. Repeat. Drag, 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 drag. That's the first retrieve. Second retrieve, you're going to throw it out, and with the rod low, almost like a sidearm, you're just going to pull it real slow. If there's a lot of wind, sometimes that's a much better alternative because you don't get a big bow in your line. Drag, drag, drag. About the only time that I'm going to shake, and there's 2 real times that I can think of. Number one is if I pitch it in on a fish that I could see, might be a spawning fish or cruising fish, and I'm going to shake it in front of them, try to attract them. Makes sense? Makes sense. The other time that I'll shake a shaky head is when I'm right up against a piece of cover. I may be right up against a log or a dock piling or something, and I'll sit there with almost slack in the line and just shake it. So the worm is sitting there and quivering. Not so it's like popping in and out. Okay, you know, it's a lot of people overwork a shaky head. So pick yourself a good worm, get the right heads, a few different colors, right tackle, toss it out there, make the right retrieve, and you'll catch a lot more fish on a shaky head. Hey, for Steve Horvath Fishing, I'm Steve.